Okay. All right. Give me
You
one
want us to
second.
mute, I imagine, right, Christine?
Yes, if everyone can go ahead and mute. All right. Oh, I should wait a minute. Can you all see this? Someone unmute and tell me if they can see this.
We can't see it yet.
It was there and it went away.
All right. Hold on a second. Sorry, guys. We just tried this and it worked just fine.
So share and then the PowerPoint.
I don't know, yeah, why I didn't do it this time. Yes? Here we go. All right. So we want to welcome you all to Lost Restaurants of Chicago with Greg Borzo. Thank you for joining us. There is a link in the chat for closed captioning, so you can just click on that and you'll be able to see the closed captioning for this program. Please type your questions in the chat and we'll share them with the presenter throughout the program. And this event is hosted by Harper College Library's One Book, One Harper program. We have two upcoming book discussions, The Egg and I by Betty McDonald, which is Friday, March 5th at 2, and 97 Orchard by Jane Zeigelman on Friday, April 9th at 2. And you can just reach out to me. I know many of you have my email if you're interested in joining us for those book discussions. Our next two programs are the Supper Club book with Dave Hoekstra, and that is Thursday, March 11th at 7 p.m. And then Road Trip Eats along Route 66 with Leslie Goddard, and that is April 15th at 7 p.m. So Greg Borzo is an author, presenter, and Chicago historian. He has written several books, including Chicago's Fabulous Fountains and the Chicago L. If you are interested in signed copies of these books, you can email Greg directly. I have his email below, but again, you can reach out to me and I can share that email with you if you'd like to contact him for a book. And also available in bookstores, right, Greg?
That's right.
Right. All right, we're going to turn it over to Greg to get started.
All right. Well, thank you, Christine, for the introduction. And see if we can get this working. Are we good?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I'm honored to be part of this program, and I see you've got Leslie and David up next. Those are great presenters and historians, so those will be, do not miss those programs. Two housekeeping issues. I would suggest that you go to full view on your screen so you don't have to look at the whole gallery view. It'll give you a larger image of these great photographs that I've collected. So that's just a suggestion. The other thing I want to mention is that this book was written prior to COVID. It just came out in about a year ago. And so I want you to put your minds back a year. Of course, we've lost tons of restaurants since then, some of them permanently, some of them temporarily. But we can't go into that except in the Q&A. My book is really pre-COVID. People have suggested I do a follow-up volume, and I won't do it because it would be too heartbreaking to go through all the restaurants we've lost in just 10, 12 months. So someone else will have to pick up the torch there. So it's sad to see a restaurant close, but in this book, we talk about a huge period of time, and it's a natural progression of lost restaurants. So let's jump in with a quote from our friend Rick Kogan. Of course, Rick Kogan is a Chicago Tribune columnist, reporter, and he's a big shot on WGN radio. When Rick reviewed my book, he said, "You are what you eat, but You're also where you eat. And that's a real good point. That helps put things in perspective for this presentation. Restaurants not only feed our bodies, take our money, have an outing, but they also nourish our souls, and they actually help define who we are. Because where you eat says a lot about your past, your prospects, your pocketbook, your identity, your friends, your milieu, etc. So it's a real important question of where you eat. Throughout working on this book, I kept one question front and center, and that is, what makes a restaurant great? What makes it a place you want to go back to or memorable? Well, the standards back in Chicago in 1887 were not as high as they are today. So an example of that is this menu from a restaurant on Clark Street, and it's all torn up. This is the inside. On the front of the menu, it says this: no scraps taken back into the kitchen and cooked over again in this restaurant. So that's back in the day when restaurants were not hoity-toity. They were really rough and tumble and not really great, not really memorable. A place to go and chow down, eat as quickly and as much as you could before the food disappeared off the table. They tended to be only for men, and you had to eat fast because it was like a family style. So that's not a great restaurant. That's not what we really want to focus on today. Here's another restaurant that might make the cut, but it could be remembered, but for a very wrong reason. This restaurant was called Colosimo's, and it was owned and run by Big Jim Colosimo, who is known as the founder of the Chicago outfit. So this restaurant was down by the levee, and he ran it in a real raucous way. It was a nightclub as well as a restaurant, and all kinds of things, gambling and other vices going on in the restaurant. Well, this is not the kind of restaurant we want to focus on, because it's remembered for the wrong reason. The reason is that he was murdered there. Colosimo got whacked in his own restaurant because he wouldn't play ball with the new forces of alcohol sales that came into force when Prohibition was introduced. So he got killed in 1920. The restaurant lasted till 1953, and all kinds of people kept going there for ghoulish reasons. But let's take the high road. Let's look at restaurants like this. It's great food, really. That's the main ingredient of a great restaurant. These morsels, for example, doesn't that make your mouth water? I don't know about you. I haven't had dinner yet, so I may cut out here soon and go have dinner, because these really are enticing. They were made by none other than Charlie Trotter, who did so much to elevate the restaurant scene in Chicago. He ran his gourmet restaurant out of a 2-flat in Lincoln Park, ran for 25 years, very, very high end, hard to get a reservation, very, very exclusive, special kind of place. You didn't even order off a menu. You simply went there and you ate what Charlie Trotter had decided to make for you that night, based on what he found fresh in the local markets. A great, really memorable restaurant. So that's the high end. How about Schawler's Pump? That's kind of on the other end of the scale, a neighborhood gathering place in Bridgeport. It was great in its own way. It must have been, because it lasted 136 years. That is the longest running restaurant I've been able to find in all of my research for Chicago. And what made it so great? Because it was patronized by cops and firefighters and politicians, of course, down in Bridgeport near the 11th Ward, daily Irish empire, political empire. And so the Powells would hang out too. This was also a great restaurant to go to before and after White Sox games. So that is an example of a modest but great, memorable restaurant. Another recipe for cooking up a memorable restaurant is to have a friendly, outgoing owner. And Eli Schulman represents that. Eli ran Eli's Place for steak for years, and he would always remember your name. He would make a point of welcoming you. He would remember your favorite cocktail and introduce you to other guests. He was just a very, very warm, gregarious person. Went out of his way to make you feel welcome. Of course, in this picture, he's holding a couple of slices of cheesecake, the recipe of which was developed at this restaurant. And then the restaurant closed, but the cheesecake recipe morphed into the Eli's Cheesecake Company, which is known around the world today. Another outgoing, gregarious owner would be Doug Sohn, who ran Hot Doug's. And he loved his customers. He sat behind this counter, took the order, and welcomed virtually every customer who came into Hot Doug's over 13 years. I mean, every single day. And he was very friendly, loved to banter with people, talk about baseball or football, how your kids are doing. He'd suggest something you had never tried before, because Hot Doug's, of course, specialized in gourmet hot dogs. But people didn't only go here to pay $15 for a gourmet hot dog, like a foie gras hot dog. They went here also to see Doug and to chat with Doug, their friend. Here's an example, story about what kind of person he was. One day, a fellow walked into his restaurant and said, "Doug, I like this place so much that I tattooed your logo on my arm." Well, Doug was so impressed. He goes like, "Hey, dude, that's really awesome. Free hot dogs for life." Well, that was pretty good. But soon word got out, and someone else came in with a tattoo of the logo. And Doug stuck to that offer, free hot dogs for life. Well, long story short, over 100 people had the logo tattooed on some body part. And in fact, after a while, Doug stopped requiring to see it, because people would come in and say, "Well, I have your logo on my butt. Do you want to see it?" Then he'd say, "No, no, no. Here's your free hot dog." So it really sounds like a bad idea, but it was very, very successful, because it created a good buzz and created a lot of good publicity for the restaurant. So it worked out. Doug actually made money off of that free hot dog offer. So that's gregarious owner. Similarly to the tattoo story, another way to have a great, memorable restaurant is to be hip. And so Vivo in the West Loop would be an example of that. It pioneered the West Loop for restaurants. And of course, today it's a world-class restaurant destination. Well, pre-COVID it was anyway. And Vivo really helped take an area of town that was just full of warehouses and butcher shops and turn it into a real destination for fine dining. It lasted several years. Other restaurants were successful, great, memorable, because many other reasons. In this case, because it was a community gathering place. The owner, Edna Stewart, ran this like a community center. I mean, there were job postings, there were church meetings. You'd walk in and you'd see Edna herself supervising homework for kids in a corner who maybe didn't have, other people encouraging them to do homework. This was really a great community center, offering soul food on the west side. Another approach was to attract and flaunt celebrities, as did the Pump Room. Here you see John Belushi and of course Roger Ebert in booth 1 at the Pump Room. And this restaurant was always seek publicity by attracting these big names. And here you see Belushi flaunting the rule that you had to have a sports coat on to eat there. I guess they just waived that for someone of his stature. I love the photo because of the phone on the table, pre-mobile phone days. Another approach would be to have a gimmick. And Julian's is one restaurant that just nailed that, literally, as you'll see in a minute. Their gimmick was magic. So they ran magic shows. And they did all kinds of card tricks and swallowing goldfish that actually were just little pieces of carrot cut to look like goldfish, and all kinds of puns and silly jokes and disappearing quarters and balls coming out from behind your ears, stuff like that. But they also had some of the best magicians in the world. And to support that claim, I'll tell you what their signature trick was. They took a deck of cards, had someone pull a card out, and identify it to their friends at the table. The magician then would take the card, or have the card put back into the deck. They'd shuffle the deck, and then they'd throw the deck against the wall, and the card that had been selected would be thumbtacked to the wall. No one ever figured out how that trick was done. That's pretty amazing. But what really made the restaurant work was the type of magic that they invented and perfected. Tableside, close-up magic, where magicians would come right to your table and do tricks right in front of you. Now, it's so easy to do magic on TV or on stage, with all the props and the light, but these magicians would do tricks right at your table. And it became so popular and so successful that this type of magic became known as Chicago magic. And you can go to Vegas today, and there'll be some casinos or restaurants, bars that will advertise and perform Chicago magic. So that's kind of an introduction of the idea of what makes a restaurant great. Here's what we're going to do with our time tonight, moving very quickly through classic restaurants, offbeat restaurants, a quick look at ethnic places, because this is Chicago, you have to look at that, and then just a quick look at a couple recently closed restaurants. So try to remember, and if you remember, then follow. Classic, one of the most classic restaurants in Chicago would have been Fritzl's on State Street, right there by the L, right by the Chicago Theater. And it was really a gathering place for politicians, your 3 martini lunch kind of place, your Mad Men kind of place, advertising executives, et cetera, et cetera. Cops knew not to write tickets for cars that were casually parked in front of and around this restaurant, because the people who ate there were so connected that they always got out of paying their parking tickets. It was that kind of place. So here's a shot of the interior, in case some of you might remember dining there. Your ultimate power lunch kind of place. Closed in 72 as the Loop was deteriorating and being abandoned a bit by those enjoying the nightlife downtown. Another classic restaurant would be, I'm sure some of you are going to recognize this place, the Bakery. They're on Lincoln Avenue in Lincoln Park. And the telltale sign that would identify this restaurant, in case you don't remember the pastry display as you walked in, The telltale sign is the fellow in the middle with the big, tall chef's hat on. That's Chef Louis. Louis owned and ran and cooked at this restaurant. He was your ultimate celebrity chef. He really got that going in Chicago. This whole notion of a celebrity chef who owns the restaurant, who cooks there, who is the maitre d', and he's also like the entertainment. He'd come out into the restaurant and talk to everybody. And one day I heard that he came out with a meat cleaver and started asking people, how you like your dinner tonight? You know, all kinds of gags and silly things. Chef Louis was quite a character. He'd been a spy, he'd been a prisoner of war, and Hungarian. He came to Chicago and ran the bakery for all those years. He also started a series of cookbooks, you know, again, the celebrity chef, the real character who made people come back again and again to his restaurant. Another classic place was Binion's. This was right downtown on Plymouth. And I give L tours for the Chicago History Museum. And here's a photo showing you where Binion's was related to the L. This is after it closed. And so when we would come by on an L tour on the L track there, people would look over and say, Binion's, oh yeah, turtle soup. Or they'd say, oh yeah, the braised oxtails, you know, all these good old world recipes. This was a great old world restaurant, dearly loved by Chicagoans. And by the way, today it's the home of the Plymouth Rooftop Bar and Restaurant. And it's a great place to eat. And up on the top floor is open. So in the good weather, you can sit there and watch the L go by and see the beauty of the Harold Washington Library. So a great place. I recommend this to everybody. Another classic restaurant, and we'll have to speed this up a bit just by taking categories of restaurants, because there are so many great delis. We could just talk for half an hour about delis. But an ultimate classic deli in Chicago was Ashkenaz, up there on Morse Avenue. The Tribune reviewed it once and said, anybody who knows a bagel from a Blintz has to go to Ashkenaz. It's the real deal. And it was a very small place, but very crowded, very crowded. Another shot taken from the L. Talked earlier to, I guess it was Jim, who loves the L. I'm a big L fan, and so I like this photo of Ashkenaz from the L platform. Here is another shot of the entrance of Ashkenaz, and that's, of course, Jimmy Carter out there campaigning. And I just threw this slide in there to make the point that politicians use restaurants in their campaigns. They go out there and they'll have, you know, Blintz for breakfast and tacos for lunch, and then stroganoff for dinner, and a way to court the different ethnic communities in Chicago. Big role that Chicago's restaurants play. Another great deli has to be mentioned would be Mort's. Mort Steinberg, a very helpful, generous guy, a little gruff, but a smart restaurateur, one of the very first who took advantage of a new law that was passed in Chicago in 1985. And that law said that it would be legal to have a sidewalk cafe in Chicago. Prior to that, it was illegal. And so quickly Mort set up a great sidewalk seating area. And of course, today, sidewalk cafes are grand. Good thing they changed that law in Chicago. Another category of great restaurants would be ice cream stores, ice cream restaurants. Here you see one of the best and most fondly remembered, Buffalo, and that was out in the northwest side of Chicago. Alas, it got replaced by a gas station. There's still a Shell gas station right on this corner. We lost a real treasure there. Here you see another shot of Buffalo. Another great ice cream shop, restaurant was Dr. Jazz, a real loud, chaotic place, always player pianos running and an old-fashioned ice cream parlor, Dr. Jazz. I would hang out there a lot. Anyway, another category of great restaurants, classic restaurants, would be your sports restaurants. Jim McMahon had one, and all kinds of other sports stars had their own restaurants, and probably the best known would have been Michael Jordan's. And here you see it at LaSalle in Illinois. Modest banner of MJ in front of the restaurant, just in case you didn't know what you're getting into. I love the basketball on the roof, and I love the building because it was built in 1888 as a cable car powerhouse. That's a whole nother story. This building, after the cable cars were removed, has often been a restaurant in its long history. Lalo's, which was a Mexican restaurant, Ireland's, a kind of a fish place. Most recently, it was Gino's East. That's been closed because of COVID, but a fun place. But just a note on your sports restaurants, they often failed because the superstar got tired of sitting around with sports fans and shooting the bull. They got tired of that, and they stopped going to their own restaurants with the frequency that the fans expected. So the fans stopped coming. And so it was a real quandary. Sports restaurants have not done all that well, with only a couple of exceptions. Another category of classic Chicago restaurants would be your tiki restaurants. That fad was started here by Don the Beachcomber in 1940. Of course, the fad started in California, came to Chicago through Don the Beachcomber. Very, very successful. Then you'd have a scads of tiki restaurants around town, from Hyde Park to Rogers Park. And the tiki restaurants were honestly not so great on the food, but more on the drink. And here you see a menu cover of Don the Beachcomber, and you see it celebrates rum and the island lifestyle. And boy, did I learn a lot from menus. The Chicago History menu has a great collection of old Chicago restaurant menus. So I just love this one because it's so active. So you'd open the menu and it'd be like 5 pages of drinks and a half a page of food. And the food was kind of mediocre. But boy, those drinks were good and strong. And Trader Vic's picked up the torch and became probably the best known of the tiki restaurants in Chicago. And boy, again, those strong drinks. My favorite back in the day when I could handle a strong drink was Trader Vic's Missionary's Downfall. That was the name of the drink, and it had like 6 shots of rum, and boy, you just would forget all your values after drinking one of those. Another great category of classic Chicago restaurants would be your steak houses. And here, what better place to start than the Stockyard Inn, which had 2 steak houses in it. One was a bullfighting theme, had all kinds of matador and bullfighting paraphernalia on display. The other had a ice throne, really, with all kinds of raw steak on it. You'd pick out your steak, they would brand it for you to make sure you got the steak you had picked out and then had cooked to order. Very, very fun restaurants down in the Stockyard area. George Diamond, another famous steakhouse, is famous for its sign as for its excellent steaks. Here's another steakhouse. I'm wondering if anybody might recognize it. Very, very successful. Morton's. The first Morton in the Gold Coast. There was a Morton down in Hyde Park run by the father, but the son opened this, and that was the classic, famous start of the Morton steakhouse chain. This was a very exclusive restaurant, small, difficult to get a reservation, but boy, did they make money. Basically, they kind of patented this idea of a steak and a potato, and maybe a little wedge to start off your meal, but very, very easy way to make lots of money with your simple menu and your really quality meat, better meat than you could get in a supermarket. So this restaurant doesn't exist anymore, but it went on to launch the Morton chain, which is spread across the country. Now, for those people who had a broader taste, how about Cafe Bohemia? Here you could get lion, bear, elk, hippo, you name it. It was a restaurant that served all kinds of different game meats, close to Union Station, so tourists would come right in and go right there directly. Two more classic restaurants to touch on. One is a Gordon. I got to know Gordon very well from working on this book. He had worked at the Tribune. He got fired. He went around looking for another job, another career, and he decided to open a restaurant. But didn't know anything about restauranting. But he learned quickly, and he had no money, so he opened his restaurant on a pretty sleazy street in a rundown part of town. This would be 512 North Clark, next to a currency exchange and an adult bookstore. Well, Gordon was very flamboyant, so he took this rundown lobby of this building. It was a hotel at one point. Here's the lobby coffee shop, and he turned it into a very, very elegant restaurant. You can see the same layout. People were afraid to go there because the part of town was so run down. But the food was so good, it got great reviews, and it blossomed. Long story short, Gordon Sinclair expanded and went on to run Chicago's most top revenue generating restaurant for several years. Wild place. And how did he do it? With creative food. He's the one who's credited with bringing flourless chocolate cake to Chicago, with food with incredible sauces, incredible chefs, and a lot of crazy parties. He would have, for example, pajama night, and you had to be dressed in pajama to get into the restaurant. So a very fun place. The last classic restaurant we're going to mention is the Black Hawk, started in 1920. Didn't do so well until they decided to introduce live music. And wow, then things really took off. And the music was so popular that Black Hawk became the place to go for your night out, your dinner and dancing. They had such big names that they broadcast the performances on WGN, which then broadcast across the whole Midwest and into parts of the entire country. They would be getting requests from Des Moines, Iowa, and Oklahoma City, and so they put in a teletype machine in the restaurant to take requests from around the country. Pretty wild, pretty successful place. Well, after a while, TV and air conditioning came in, and people didn't go out so much. They didn't want to get all dressed up. And so the Black Hawk decided they better do something different. So they went with a new concept. The food is the show. And so they introduced the spinning salad bowl, the roving prime rib cart, and a lot of showmanship around the food. Here's Don Roth doing that spinning salad bowl for somebody. But the restaurant also had like a wine library and a men's club and fashion shows and the frontier room in the basement for kids. So very creative, successful classic restaurant. I threw this in here to make a good point about the role that restaurants play in Chicago, especially the classic restaurants. In this scene, you see our friend Eli Schulman in the middle, then Don Roth of the Black Hawk on the far right, and in between in the tux is Rich Melman, who picked up on the Don Roth idea of the food as the show and went on to develop that through all of the Let Us Entertain You restaurants. Those three restaurateurs are making a presentation to, of course, Mayor Jane Byrne. They said, oh, let's celebrate Chicago foods. Let's bring the city together and offer them samples of food from all kinds of different restaurants. Well, of course, that was the birth of Taste of Chicago. And here you see the first Taste of Chicago in Chicago was on Michigan Avenue. They expected 75,000 people. Well, 250,000 people showed up, and the year after and subsequently, they had to hold it in Grant Park because it was so successful. My point here is that restaurants not only take your money, feed you, they also add to the culture and the character and the celebration of the city. And what better example than Taste of Chicago? So very quickly, a few offbeat restaurants. How about this one, the Sky High Drive-In? This began with a DC-6 that was damaged on landing at O'Hare Airport in 1961. Well, they didn't know what to do with the plane, and so this fellow who owned this drive-in at Monroe and Cicero bought the dismantled plane and had it moved to his restaurant and propped it up on the roof of his drive-in. What a great idea. What a showstopper. If you drive by, you really want to stop here and see what this is about. Well, the best part was that you'd walk in the little restaurant, order your food, and then you'd go upstairs to eat. And of course, the restaurant was decked out like an airplane, and the waitresses would have been dressed up as stewardesses. What fun that must have been. Never had a chance to eat there. The airport theme was very, very popular in the 60s. Jets just coming on the scene. People loved airports. They'd go to airports to watch planes take off and land. And so you had two great restaurants at the airports. Here you see the Cloud Room at Midway, and of course, Seven Continents at O'Hare. People would actually go to these restaurants to eat. They didn't just eat there because they were stuck on a delayed flight. These were destination restaurants, and they were both set up so that the patrons could look out the window and watch planes take off and land. Well, I don't think I would want to do that today, but that certainly was very, very successful for those two restaurants. Here's another offbeat restaurant, Flo's, right downtown off of State Street. And its claim to fame was the fact that it featured outside a young, scantily clad lady swinging back and forth on a trapeze swing, advertising the restaurant, encouraging you to come in. Not very PC. I don't think it would go over today. And this was basically a restaurant. It wasn't really a casino or anything, but this was considered okay, I guess, in the 60s and 70s. Oh, and that's just a little ad showing how this restaurant really caught on a lot of attention. to that trapeze artist. Now, here's a restaurant that I think maybe picked up on that idea. Texas de Brazil. Unfortunately opened at the start of the financial crisis, so it didn't last very long. But this is one of my favorite restaurants of all time because inside it featured a 4-story wine wall. All your wines were set up on that rack going up 4 stories, and it featured a trapeze artist swinging back and forth who would go up and fetch the bottle of wine you ordered. And these gals they were all women. They were very, very talented. This was almost Cirque du Soleil type of acrobatic fetching of your wine. And they'd always bring the wine down without turning the bottle over. They would spin around, but they'd keep the bottle steady and upright so it wouldn't get jostled. A fun, fun place. Another fun place, offbeat, fun place, Sally's Stage. It was a raucous place. They had a pipe organ rescued from Riverview, and it had servers who would bring the food to your table on roller skates, as you can see the rink going around the tables. After the roller skaters got a little passe, they switched to robots. They had little R2-D2 kind of robots who would actually deliver your food. Another offbeat place, Matt Eigler's, and it was famous for singing waiters. And they were talented singers, better at singing than serving, I would have to say. And they would sing in several languages and often would take requests. Sometimes they would burst out in song, other times they would gather as a group and sing kind of on an off-stage kind of basis. Their most favorite song, famous and most requested, was the German version of an Elvis Presley tune. And it was, "You Ain't Nothing But a Schweinhund." How about that? Another offbeat place was Kungsholm, a Swedish place with a great smorgasbord, but better known for its miniature operas. Operas put on by rod puppets, and often the entire opera would be presented, and these were dedicated puppets to different famous opera characters. Really quite a crazy place. More than 1 million people saw opera here, and this restaurant ran this offbeat idea from 1937 all the way up to 1971. My last offbeat restaurant, the Great Grigsby's Flying Food Show. One of Rich Melman's The Food is the Show kind of places. It basically only offered a cheese bar and a dessert bar. I like this because you could go back and have all the desserts you wanted, but it really failed. It was kind of a bizarre place, weird decor, and it just didn't take off. One of Rich Melman's very, very few failures, and Rich knew it, and so shortly before closing it, he renamed it. And here is a newspaper article about him renaming it, and he changed the name to the Not So Great Grigsby's. Good sense of humor. So ethnic, of course, Italian, Homo Inn, huge restaurant with a lot of little dining rooms. You could get lost in here on your way back from the restroom. Club El Bianco, known for its fiesta dinners, where the food just kept coming and coming. 3 hours of food you were in for if you went to the famous fiesta dinner. Another Let Us Entertain You place, Scusi's, another, just threw that in there, a famous Italian restaurant. There were a lot of famous Chinese restaurants. Today, Chinese restaurants are not so extravagant, but back in the day, they had ivories, the carvings, the chandeliers, fountains. Jimmy Wong's downtown is a great example of that, as is Jose Gay. These restaurants were incredibly ornate, and they basically got driven out of the downtown by increasing rents, and many of them moved to Chinatown. Zum Deutschen Eck would be a good example of the German restaurants that have proliferated in Chicago. So many great German restaurants, and here you see it on its last legs. Thank you for 44 great years, it says on the sign. Auf Wiedersehen. And this was a real authentic German restaurant. Soul food restaurants all over the south and west sides. And one example would be Soul Queen Cafe, founded by a very stylish Helen Maybell, who's in the picture above. She ran this like what's the word? A royal castle. She was the queen, and you can see that the waitresses here have crowns. They were princesses, and the busboys were princes. Elegant, high-end kind of soul food restaurant. And then the French restaurants all over Chicago continue to be among the most popular. Chez Paul's in the Gold Coast really set the bar very high. Perhaps one reason why the Blues Brothers tore it to ribbons in that movie, because it was so pretentious, so good, so over the top that they were just asking for Belushi to get in there and tear it apart. If you haven't seen that Blues Brothers, you've got to check that out. Here's another French restaurant, Maxime's. Oh, but this one's in Paris. Well, in 1963, Maxime's, probably the best known, best viewed restaurant in the world, decided to franchise. And they picked Chicago to open its first branch. And you see Maxime's de Chicago, and very, very beautiful, elegant restaurant, your grand piano, your gold fleur-de-lis, your red velvet, all over everywhere. Let's finish up with just a couple recently closed restaurants. Again, the pre-COVID restaurants recently closed. The Cape Cod Room, known for bookbinder soup and Dover sole. They say nothing ever changed at the Cape Cod Room there in the Drake Hotel, except the prices. It was very, very traditional restaurant. Didn't change much, and eventually just ran out of steam. The Parthenon closed in 2016. Very sad, because this is where flaming saganaki was invented, was first served. And today you go to Greece and they'll serve you flaming saganaki, but it actually started at the Parthenon. Juan Cao recently closed in Chinatown, and here's Sabatino's recently closed, a great Italian-American restaurant. Here's another Italian-American restaurant that just closed. Monasteros closed in 2017. It was on the top of its game. It had the restaurant that was always packed. It had catering. It had carryout. It supported opera with scholarships for young kids who wanted to sing opera. It was very popular with the Italian-American community and the whole northwest side of Chicago. It closed at the top of its game. Why? Because one day, some people came into the restaurant, very well dressed, and said, "We want to buy your restaurant. We want to open our church right here." Now, I wasn't privy to the conversation. They might have been laughed out of the room. Why in the world do you need to open your church right here? Well, they said apparently that there were some good vibes about that location, and the price was right, so they made an offer that Monasteros couldn't refuse. Monasteros closed down. And here, oh, another view of Monasteros. Here you see the church being built. the Romanian Pentecostal church being built right on that same site. Go figure. Who knows why? So we're about done here. I just want to say the book is not a downer, because for every restaurant I point out that's been closed, I point out in the book others that are similar. Como Inn is gone, but you got Bruna's in the heart of Italy neighborhood. Maxime's is gone, but you got Mon Ami Gabi, etc. Some great restaurants are still offering these same delicious foods and these same experiences. So that's about it. I want to finish with one very, very quick story, and then we're done. Sorry, we're running over just a bit. The book came out, and I started to go around to libraries and stuff and talk about it. And one day, after a presentation, a lady came up to me and said, "You know, this picture in your book really brought back memories. It made me cry. The memories were so strong." That's really incredible. Just as background, BG Restaurants was kind of just a average restaurant, like a Panera of today. There was a chain of them around town. And she said, when I turned the page and I saw this photo, oh, my heart started beating fast and the tears started to flow. And I said, "Well, why?" And she said, "Well, this is because my husband proposed to me here." Well, I said, "He was your husband. You must have gotten married to him. And isn't that a good thing?" And she said, "Oh, yeah, it was great. But when he proposed to me at this crummy place, I said no. I made him re-propose to me later at a really nice restaurant. And then she said yes." So I hope this book leaves you with those kind of memories and those kinds of experiences. So I'd love to take questions if you have any, or hear your stories about some of your favorite restaurants.
Greg, thank you so much for that. That was wonderful. That was wonderful. I don't see any questions in the chat yet, but I'm going to ask you, was there a restaurant that you walked into or that floated through your mind that you thought, I have to write a book? Like, what was that moment where you thought this would make a really great book, The Lost Restaurants of Chicago?
Oh, wow. Great question. Probably, I don't know if anybody remembers Lawrence of Oregano, an Italian restaurant on Diversey. Just over the top exuberance, and the walls were covered with drawings of the waiters and waitresses who worked there, so everybody just loved the place. And the name Lawrence of Oregano, and it was affordable. I remember that place clearly. Just so many other places. It wouldn't be the high-end places because I never could afford to eat in any of them, like the Pump Room. But yeah, that would be one example. You think of another example of something that just made me, really want to learn more about restaurants, because, I'm a journalist and an author, and you've all heard the advice: write what you know. Well, I take a different approach. I write about things I want to know about. So I didn't know much about restaurants, except that I liked them. And so I wrote about it so that I could learn more and more about them. And so that worked. As I wrote and learned and sampled different restaurants, I learned a lot about them. Little Bucharest comes to mind. That was a Hungarian restaurant. I think it was up on Ashland Avenue, south of Belmont. And the food was just so good. You just couldn't wonder how they did it, and you just want to come back. I like restaurants too with large menus, lots of different things to choose from. I'm going to give you one more, and it might be my favorite restaurant of all time, the Russian Tea Time. You go there and I've never been to Russia, but you probably think you're in Russia. There's guys doing flights of vodka, while you're having your caviar and your borscht. It's a real experience, and the decor is gorgeous. It's got a bunch of samovars around, which is what the Russians would use to make and serve tea, and just a complete experience. And of course, it is a reference to the Russian um, tea time, Russian tea room in New York City, which is very close to Carnegie Hall. And it used to attract movie stars from Woody Allen to the great Van Cliburn and other musicians. And so we have our own Russian tea room. It's called Russian Tea Time, and it's great on all accounts.
Excellent. So we have a question from Jim, and then we have a story that somebody wants to share.
Jim, no questions about the L.
So Jim's question is, what's the earliest Chicago restaurant that you researched?
That would be the Lake House Hotel. That was one of Chicago's first brick buildings, a classy, for its day, classy hotel put up right close to the river and the lake. And the hotel had a great restaurant. They even had napkins and tablecloths. And so in the early days of Chicago, you had, trappers, Native Americans, you had all kinds of voyageurs coming through. And so it was a very, very rough place. So then in the middle of this, you get the lake house that opens up. And it was known as the greatest hotel west of the Allegheny Mountains. And in that hotel, you had this great lake house restaurant. So that goes back to like 1836, right when the village was being incorporated into a city. So that's I wish I had been able to experience that. It would have been jaw-dropping for people to go in that place. They thought, certainly that they were in New York or Boston when they entered that restaurant.
And then we have Aaliyah, who would like to share a story with us. So I don't know, Aaliyah, are you able to unmute yourself? If not, we can have Dave unmute you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi. I will first want to thank you for taking the time out to tell us about your book. Really am happy to hear about it. But once went to a place as a kid called Grandma's Pancake House, which was in Chicago, and it was a really great place. You really didn't see a lot of young people there, but there was a lot of old people that I would see there that would go there all the time, and they always loved the service and the food. It was like an IHOP, but just you felt more love there.
Oh yeah.
And they had to close down due to the fact that more restaurants like McDonald's and everything were opening up around them and were taking the business from it. And they had to close down because they wasn't making much money from it. And it just broke my heart as a kid because I used to love going there on weekends with my family and having a good time, and then just seeing them have to disappear like that.
Yes. Have you been able to find another one that's similar to help you kind of relive those memories and experiences? A local,
Unfortunately,
genuine pancake
something.
house? No?
So not something with service and
Yeah.
someone that with the wait service that remembers you, even though you only been there a couple of times. I haven't
Yeah.
found something exactly like that. It's hard to find places like that with
Yes,
all the restaurants and everything around these days.
yes.
Aaliyah, what was your favorite thing to order there? Do you remember?
It was the blueberry waffles.
Oh,
The
stop.
blueberry waffles with the 'cause kids, we just love all the extra sugar. The blueberry waffles with the crispy bacon and the scrambled eggs, and I just loved how they used to do the whipped cream in a
Oh,
smiley face.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And the maple syrup. Yeah,
Yeah, it was
good
so
stuff.
beautiful
Good
and
stuff.
just loved it.
Well, I
Looks like
tried.
you
Go ahead.
looks like you got a goal in life, huh, Aaliyah?
Oh, I definitely have something to look forward to if I ever have to make
Open
my
a
own
pancake
restaurants.
house.
Yeah,
See, I'm going
yeah.
to recommend to you the Walker Brothers. Now, they have a few around town, but their food is excellent. And if you go back a few times, they might remember you, sit in the same, ask for the same server. They're affordable and really excellent food. They're, 3 egg omelet. It's like I would call it a 3 day omelet because I always take it home afterwards. And they're going to have blueberry waffles. So I'm going to recommend that to you.
I definitely wrote the name down.
Walker
Sounds
Brothers.
sounds good. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions, and we don't want to keep anyone too long. We thank you for spending your snowy, cold evening with us and with Greg and his restaurants. Possibly not the best time to have a program about places that we can't go,
Yeah.
whether they're open or out of
Yeah.
business. But now we all have, we're inspired, right, to find some good places that are open right now. So
And I'll leave you with a piece of advice. Eat out the Chicago way early and often. Because when you find a place like Grandma's Pancake House, the only way they're going to survive going forward is if we keep supporting these great restaurants
mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Support local businesses, right?
early and often.
Early and often. Well, thank you, Greg, so much again for everything. And thank you, everyone, for participating and joining us this evening. So we hope to see you next month on March 11th for the Supper Club book with Dave Hoekstra, where he talks about that Midwest charming supper club experience. So we're looking forward to that as well.
Great.
Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you.
Have a good night.